Welcome back to Cinematic. I'm Ryan. We're talking about Kung Fu movies, and we've done some stone cold classics so far, some perfectly representative Hong Kong action films. We just did Disciples of the 36th Chamber, a movie that rarely makes anybody's list above any of its predecessors, and I'd still say that movie put that franchise into just my top 10 of any genre of all time. But I've hardly even scratched the surface of even just what Hong Kong action has to offer. Anybody can tell you. But I've been doing a few of these now. We're in episode 23. Chronologically, we're in 1985. At this point, if you count Five Fingers of Death having at the very least helped launch the Kung Fu boom in the States in the early 70s, something that had been going on in China for easily a decade before that, there is a thing that tends to happen after you've been around for 20 years or so. Kids. And I've been pretty careful to curb my comments, especially culturally, when it comes to a lot of what I'm seeing, because even no matter how much I read, I just haven't lived it. I just don't know. But in this case, I can speak with absolute experience and authority when it comes to how the States can smooth out a subculture. And we're not the only ones that do it, obviously, but we're pretty good at it, I'd say. I think we all would have a moment like this. With me, it happened with music, so I've talked about this before, but punk rock was kind of my little niche, the thing I chose to go against the grain, you could say. It's a bad religion from... And I wasn't alone, obviously. This is the 90s, so we're talking like third wave probably here anyway. So I hadn't even left high school, basically, when pop punk started happening. They had repackaged my thing for the masses, right? And I'm making it sound easier or neater than it actually is. Things like this move in ripples and waves and are made up of actual human beings. We'll come back to that. But again, I would think we've all had at least one experience like this in our lives where the thing we liked got popular, or I don't know, you've only ever liked pop, and I've merely adopted the darkness here. You were born in it. But the same thing happened to Kung Fu, right? Kung Fu had kids. In fact, literally, in '84, the year before The Karate Kid came out. And that was obviously a huge success. This is not a Karate Kid hate thread in any sense of the word. I'm pretty sure I like all of those movies. Okay, I couldn't tell you anything about the remake. But I don't even think the next Karate Kid is a bad movie. Then there's a movie called The Next Karate Kid with Hilary Swank, actually. Go check it out. Again, I don't think it's bad. We love Cobra Kai in this household. Also not alone, but big recommendation. So we are to that point in 1985. So you can imagine a world where Berry Gordy, you know, the founder of Motown Music, would produce a film with Michael Schultz, who directed Car Wash and, oh, I don't know, Grease Lightning, among other things. Although we're going to talk about what he directed squarely between The Jerk 2 and Crush Groove. We're going to talk about The Last Dragon, which is a movie I have never seen, had never seen, but it seems the more people got to know me, assumed that I definitely had. So Matt Amberg, great friend, obviously recommended it a long time ago, in fact, at this point, and most recently, Greg. So thank you, maybe, because The Last Dragon is one of those movies that's bad to a lot of people and a cult classic to others. I'm probably somewhere in the middle, although it's going to sound like I love this thing by the time I'm done with it. I can't believe I've talked about it this much already, but it's a roller coaster. No matter what you say about The Last Dragon, it is a roller coaster. It starts off with basically one of those abstract kung fu demonstrations, you know, like a lot of these movies have, like a lot of the movies that came before it that we've talked about have begun. But it does turn out that he's in his dojo and it does roll right into the movie from there. But I do think it knows what it's doing at that point, even though shortly after getting into the movie, we see the master and disciple. The master is packing his bags. The disciple's like, "What are you doing?" Master's like, "You're done." And because of that, the student starts to go through kind of an existential crisis, and the master says something like, "You've been going to too many movies with disciples in it," which, so have I. So I'm kind of down at this point. I'm like, well, I hope this isn't something that literally trashes all of the movies that made this thing possible in the first place. And I don't think it does, to be clear. You could say that it's about life after discipleship, which I think is a decent premise. And I think this movie does set up that premise in a satisfactory way. He's even given a little MacGuffin. He's given this medallion that was once owned by Bruce Lee and tasked with taking it to Kung Fu Master Sum Dum Goy. I don't think I realized that was the name of the master until later, but anytime anytime they verbalize the spiritual journey, I think it's really good. When he talks about it, it's called the final level. It's a little hokey, but when he says that it's when the spirit takes over the mind and guides the body without thought, again, I'm pretty much in. Cut to Leroy. Did I mention his name is Leroy, by the way? AKA Bruce Leroy, serious, saucy Leroy Green, played by Timok, just Timok, who is a black belt that was taught to act on set, I believe, or took lessons on set, which probably isn't that rare, actually, but had not acted before, was recruited straight from the dojo. In fact, Ron Van Cleef's dojo. So we'll get there, but cut to him in a literal grindhouse watching Enter the Dragon. In fact, the theater is still around. It's the Victory Theater on 42nd Street, which is now for families. It didn't used to be. But people are breakdancing in the aisles. It's like the scene after everything we've just talked about. It's pretty much like the most, hey, it's all the stuff the kids love, just all at once. It's kind of breathtaking in a way. And a fight breaks out. The whole scene is basically an excuse to introduce Shonuff, who is the Shogun of Harlem. So we are also playing a little bit fast and loose with culture here, that being a Japanese thing. Also, I believe Leroy calls his mother and father Mama-san and Papa-san later. Again, Japanese as well as the ninjas that you'll see. But what were you gonna do? Karate Kid made millions. But this fight breaks out in the actual grindhouse. And it's not, we don't get an actual face-off between Shonuff and Leroy. It's just basically set up. Leroy takes a powder, speaking of mixed cultural references, but it's fine. The fight in the theater is fine. It's choreographed by Ron Van Cleef, but none of the kung fu in this movie is getting by on its technicality, so to speak. Asterisk. We'll come back to that. But it's also just table setting at this point. We get, Shonuff and Leroy facing off for a second, and then they're gone. The real heavy in this movie is a music producer, kind of gangster, by the name of Eddie Arcadian, who's assembled this crack team of character actors in Mike Starr, William H. Macy, and Chaz Palminteri to try and get his music video played on the popular TV show Laura's Video Hot Picks. And at this point, she has hot picked DeBarge's Rhythm of the Night, and they just kind of play the whole. There's actually a fair amount of like straight up cam footage in this thing. It's not like they cut to the actual video. They cut to somebody filming a screen of the actual video, and they do this a few times. They did it with Enter the Dragon. They'll do it with Fist of Fury later. They do it here with Rhythm of the Night. And kind of from a like film school ruined me point of view, I really like it. Like this movie exists squarely in a universe where Bruce Lee is real, like the actor, and as well as DeBarge. A movie that simultaneously wouldn't exist without these things, but also literally helped boost Rhythm of the Night. Like there's a significant number of people in the world that heard that song first in The Last Dragon, or just will forever refer to that song as the song from The Last Dragon. Because again, the soundtrack's kind of great. I mean, Rhythm of the Night is good all on its own. It did not need The Last Dragon. And the title track, Last Dragon by Richard Perry, didn't fare necessarily as well, let's say, but it was still produced by Richard Perry. A name I recognized but did not know was because he also produced the Pointer Sisters and Carly Simon, among others. So it's, I've heard this referred to as a Motown movie, and in that sense, yeah. But Laura of Laura's Video Hot Picks, played by Vanity, by the way, just Vanity, refuses to play the music video, so is kidnapped and is rescued by Leroy. And this is kind of where Taimak gets to show his stuff, because and this is why I still end up loving a lot of these movies. Taimak is obviously a talented martial artist. There's just, and I've talked about this before, with all of these movies, there are people that when they get on screen and they do like their first kick or whatever, you can tell. And Taimak is one of those, you can tell. So there's some skill at the center of this thing, not necessarily in the acting department, but sometimes you want your lines delivered by an action Adonis that's taking acting lessons on set. You know, and this is kind of the era where that was institutionalized in a way, right? I mean, think about even just Schwarzenegger, right? Like, maybe I'm doing Taimak a disservice by putting him on the same stage as Schwarzenegger, but he's good in this movie. And he's not the only one. Ernie Reyes Sr. is also in here with Ron Van Cleef. They do actually get on camera for, they're like bit parts. I don't think they actually have any lines. Although, in the last act, Ernie Reyes Sr. does have a fight with his son, Ernie Reyes Jr. This is Ernie Reyes Jr.'s first movie, so he's like he's like pre-Sidekicks. I should talk about Sidekicks. Sidekicks was in '86, so that'll happen. The TV series, by the way, which I believe spawned from a Magical World of Disney episode, so not the movie with Chuck Norris later, which I may also end up talking about, but happened in '92. So, point is, Ernie Reyes Jr. is in this, and he's great. But I'm not going to sit here and dump on this thing, basically, is what I'm saying. Obviously, it's regrettable in some ways. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that somebody somewhere wasn't trying to cash in with stuff like this, and that's too bad. But if you can get past some of that, like, if you can focus on the actual human beings I mentioned previously, I think there's a lot to love. And I think it's because a lot of the people involved did love it. You know, like, tell me Taimak didn't look up to people like Jim Kelly or obviously Ron Van Cleef since he was in his class. Jim Kelly, funny enough, offered the part of Shogun in this movie and turned it down. Kind of thankfully, I like Jim Kelly a lot. It's hard to imagine Shogun played by anybody else but Julius Carry. Show enough. Good gosh, what is wrong with me? But even Julius Carry, who I would venture did not know martial arts before this film, tell me he isn't having a ton of fun. And it shows, you know, and it comes across, and you have fun because of it. Like, nobody's confused about what they're doing here. And I would include Taimak in that. Okay. His character's kind of a weird play. He's so steeped in Chinese culture that he is the fish out of water, kind of in his own neighborhood. So he is literally confused in the movie. But at one point, so he loses the medallion, Laura finds it, and when he asks her about it, she's like, oh, the belt buckle looking thing? And he's like, what is this belt buckle? I'm like, okay. I guess he ties the gi? I don't know. He's the cipher, right? He is the one, especially since, again, he exists in this world where Bruce Lee is real. He's an actor. He goes to grindhouses. Like, he's obviously the audience stand-in here. But I think he's actually so good at playing that kind of innocent blank slate that he's easy to root for. And that's good, because the premise does end up falling by the wayside pretty quickly. Again, that idea that he's on a journey of sorts, except along the way he goes to movies and teaches martial arts classes, which, why wouldn't you? But again, not a lot of actual journeying going on, but it's probably for the better, because I think it turns out that the master he was looking for is literally like, it really seems like he's in the same neighborhood, you know, like right around the corner, if I had to guess. Although it's barred by 3 guys that, if you check the credits, are actually named Hu Yi, Lu Yi, and Du Yi. But once he's able to get past them, he finds out that the master, some dumb goy, it was actually a fortune cookie computer, I guess. So there's a few racial references that might not stand up. I'm not sure anybody escapes unscathed from this one necessarily in that way. The soundtrack is an all bangers, you know, Suki Yaki Hatsaki Su probably hasn't aged incredibly well. But if you take the beginning, again, where they set up that premise and it's kind of this idea, what is life after discipleship, you know, where do you go? It's not always going to be master disciple. What's next for you? For everybody, it's different. If you take that and the ending where he does finally go up against Shonuff, and like the choreography is not great, but the fight is. You know, like there's actually some special effects that I really enjoy, like legitimately. And for some reason, you know, there isn't nothing to everything in the middle. It's a little bit messy, obviously, but it must contribute enough that there is actually some payoff at the end that I found pretty, I'm getting choked up just talking about it. I'm not, but it's good. The beginning and the ending are good. I don't care who you are. Middle's a little messy. Overall, again, you just got to get past some of the goofiness, or, you know, if somebody was trying to cash in here and there, and you can enjoy it. I think it's still pretty easy to enjoy The Last Dragon. So I know I said we were gonna ease our way into the movies from the States here, and I probably just shoved you under the water, but let's see if we can't regain some of that ground by actually watching the movie I said I would watch this week in Jackie Chan's The Protector from, it is not, there's another martial arts, in fact, seminal martial arts film, I think with, oh gosh, it's not Jet Li, it is Tony Jaa, I believe. Not that one, anyway. It's Jackie Chan's almost crossover into the States from 1985. And we're going to go for the Hong Kong version. I am careful to stress, which I guess if I was doing this right, I would watch both and we would talk about that and we'd really have an idea about, you know, what was crossing over, where, when, how. But that movie, nobody likes. And for other reasons, I'm not interested in it. So I found the Hong Kong cut of The Protector, and I want to see when, I believe it was after the fact, quite possibly. That would be something to find out that I will tell you next week. Whether they were released simultaneously or whether The Protector came out in the States, bombed like it did. Jackie Chan very unhappy with it and recut it, I think himself, for Hong Kong. I'll figure out the story. We'll talk about it by next week. So thank you for hanging out. Please go visit the Patreon if you can, or PayPal if you can. Send me a few bucks. If you already do, you are these people.